Hmm. Our guest right now on the Howie Rose Show is a nuclear expert, Arnie Gundersen. From nuclear industry CEO to whistleblower to expert witness. Let's go back to the 70s. Was it still in the 70s when you went through that transition?
It was the 80s, the end of the 80s and into 1990.
You worked inside. You were inside the industry for a good decade.
20 years.
20 years. And so, did you have any personal moments of, questioning what you were doing in light of your, career path and ideas about what your life would look like and, income and things like that?
I had some safety concerns back in the 70s, but I went to senior management and I won. They got rectified. So
I see.
So I sort of again continued to believe the system worked. In the 80s, as a VP and then a senior VP, I actually built the fuel racks that were installed in Vermont Yankee, and we had some serious design problems with the racks that we analyzed and solved. But there were none of them were deal breakers for me. I always was convinced that there was enough margin of safety, and on top of that, there was an effective regulator. And between those two things, I was comfortable.
Mm-hmm. So, did you work mainly with a specific nuclear power plant, or did your company kind of build them all over?
In the 70s, I worked on for two utilities on 4 different power plants. And in the 80s, though, the company I worked for, my staff, I had about 400 people reporting to me, were at about 70 nuclear power plants around the country, and we were also selling products to Japan and Korea. So it was, I've been at many nuclear sites. The one that I cut my eye teeth on were the Millstone units down in Connecticut, one of which is almost identical to Vermont Yankee.
Uh-huh. Now, so during your career, did your perspective on other energy sources, say fossil fuels, coal, and then things like nuclear and hydro and wind, did your perspective on those energy sources change as you went through your personal transformation in regards to nuclear?
I think that happened in about 2005. This is a long evolution. There was no aha moment.
Uh-huh.
In 2000, I used to say that if oil got to $80 a barrel, nuclear could be safe. Because if oil got up to that point, nuclear would be so incredibly lucrative that money could then get put into safety modifications. So that happened in 2005, 2006, 2007, when oil was over. You remember when your car was pushing $4 a gallon. And what happened then was that I sat back and I waited for all this investment in nuclear safety, and it didn't happen. All of that money went to the bottom line. The stockholders walked away with millions and millions of dollars.
Do you feel in retrospect that you were a little naive about thinking that some forces would somehow send that extra slush flow into nuclear
Well, I think
safety?
I've been naive a lot. The trust in the government is another example of being naive. There's a saying that the 3 biggest lies in the English language are: the check is in the mail, which gets to this one. Of course, I'll still love you in the morning, and I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. And so, at least on 2 of the, I've personally experienced 2 of the 3 of those. And yes, I was naive.
Now, I just want to, because I don't want to forget, I want to relay to you a story, and I would like your opinion on whether this is just a tall tale or whether there could be any legs to this story. Back in 1985, I worked for a summer with a fellow who had helped build Vermont Yankee. And he claimed that during the building, that in some portion of what he was working on, I have no idea what aspect of Vermont Yankee he was working on, that he and his fellow workers felt like it had been over designed, overbuilt, and he described cutting off the heads of bolts and kind of sticking the head into the wet concrete to make it look like there was a bolt there, and using a real bolt for like every fourth or fifth one, putting in the real deal, and the ones in between just being these heads kind of stuck into wet concrete to make it look like there were bolts there, which I found rather alarming.
I have heard, people have told me those stories too, former people who built the plant, about the quality of the concrete and shoddy welding practices. I haven't found any, but I've heard that from enough construction people that it's more than an urban myth, but it's not yet, mainstream provable technology. I will tell you this: when I was in the nuclear industry back in the '80s, I hired a guy who had been an employee of Tennessee Valley Authority, and we did ultrasonic inspections of pipes. And what that means is you put a thing that's like a sonar. It sends a sonar beam into the pipe, and if there's a crack, it bounces back. If there's not a crack, it goes all the way to the back wall and comes back. So you can tell by the time the pulse comes back whether or not there's a crack there. That was the business I was in. I hired this guy from Tennessee Valley Authority, and he had great credentials. He tested perfectly, and we put him out in the field, and he came back with all these great results. The pipes were solid as a rock, and somebody rechecked one of his welds and found out that it was useless. It was falling apart. And so we confronted him on it. And he says, yeah, well, when I was at Tennessee Valley Authority, we were told to set our instrument up in the lab and then go out in the field and readjust the instrument so all our welds succeeded. So we fired the guy, and all of the welds he inspected for us, we re-inspected. And we did not find any other ones except the one that one. But there was no effort on Tennessee Valley Authority's part to go back and re-examine every weld he did while he worked for them. So those construction practices, I have one personal experience where they're real, but not on Vermont Yankee.
Interesting. Wow. That's really disheartening and alarming to hear, because I have to assume that that's representative. That's just the tip of the iceberg. That people are going to cut corners to make a few extra bucks and make themselves look good, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of amazing to me in retrospect that you lasted in the industry for 20 years before bumping up against, overt, corruption and unethical practices.
I guess when I found problems, and you're going to have problems, we would correct them, and you always felt that every problem was corrected, so therefore you can move forward. I think that's probably a little bit naive. I can clearly say that the problems I knew about, I corrected, but that doesn't mean that you missed the problem. And of course that's the problem. That's what happened at 3 Mile and Fukushima and Chernobyl. You can't anticipate everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Our guest this hour on the Howie Rose Show is nuclear expert Arnie Gundersen. Stay tuned, and we'll be back. If you have questions for Arnie, please do give us a call at 861-9666. That's 861-WOMM. Or you can IM us at Radiator DJ, or you can send email to fp@thehowierosshow.com, and we'll read that on the air. You are listening to theradiator.org, 105.9 FM Burlington. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with the joint Sleepy Strange Howie Rose Show concert calendar.